Alright, Chapter 21, Valves and Gears. Walls-Chester-Baker valve gears. The valve gears is a mechanism used for the purpose of regulating distribution of steam in the cylinders, moving the piston valve so the steam ports are open and closed in proper sequence. The following definition of various valve terms. Piston valve, a cylindrical spool fitted with the packing rings at the each end of the page, figure 52, page 116, that operates with a cylindrical valve chamber, which has an operating from the steam pipe at the center of the cylinders at each end. It permits alternate inlet and outlet of steam that distributes the piston pressure of the inner packing of the ring at each end, known as the steam ring, and in the outer ring as the exhausting ring. Valve chambers enclosed with the steam reservoir in which the valve operates. Port, the opening of the passageway between the valve chamber and the cylinder for the emission of live steam, and the exhaust of the steam that has been used. Figure 52, page 11, 116. Full gear is the position at which the valve gear causes the maximum valve movement of the consequential maximum cylinder power. This position ensures the greatest reliability of the starting movement of the positively predetermined placing of the reverse lever in either the full gear, the forward, or the full gear backward. Cutting off the closing of the steam port by the valve port before the piston has reached the end of the stroke, and 25% of the cutoff that means for the stem to the cylinder has been shut off when the piston has been traveled 1/4 of the length of the stroke. Steam lap, the distance between the admission of the edge of the valve at the nearest edge of the steam port when the valve is in mid-position. Figure 52, page 116. The piston, if the steam is in the cylinder, has to be worked expansively. 7. Lead, and with the width of the steam port opening at the beginning of the piston stroke. Admission is applying with the living steam pressure piston of the pressure through the steam port of the opening between the valve chamber and the cylinder in a duration beginning with the stroke with the point of the cutoff of the manually controlled by the position of the reverse lever. Expands the steam and the pressure of the piston beyond the admission period of the accomplishment of the valve lap, which permits the cutoff by mass of steam increasing the bulk of the relatively decreasing pressure. Exhaust and discharge expanding the steam from the cylinder with the atmosphere through the exhausted port opening of its duration is from the time the exhausting ring opening of the port until the piston completes its stroke. 11. Compression. The piston is the pressure builds up in the cylinder with the piston after the exhaust port with the closed with the remaining stem, and this is compressed with the piston for the purpose of reducing initial pressure for the returning piston stroke of the action as the cushion to absorb the momentum of the moving parts. 12. The valves out of square means the engine has a greater port opening at one end of the cylinder, and then on one side of is working stronger than the opposite side. The distribution of the valve is uneven. The efficiency of the engine is reduced. This can be determined by the soundness of the exhaust from the stack, which is uneven at the time elapsing between the exhausts and not the same. Figure 52, page 116 shows the piston valve in mid-position with the engine on the bottom quarter with the reverse lever in the center. This position has both ports closed with the emission of the steam to the cylinder. Moving the reverse lever for the full forward position will move the valve ahead so that the front port will be open for the emissions of steam to the cylinder, and back port will be wide open for the exhaust. Walchester valve gear. The valve gear, figure 53, page 119, consists of the following principal parts. Figure 53 shows the Walchester valve gear. Your frame, your eccentric rod, your live rod, your main crank pin, the eccentric crank arm, the knuckle joint pin, front side rod, main rod, central figural air, piston rod, long river valve stem, radius rod guide, stem crosshair, radius rod hinder lifting shaft nozzles. Alright, your eccentric crank on each of the attached with the main crank pins to give proper travel to the valve. The eccentric rods transmit motion to the length. The links of the oscillate with the trunnions at the center of the carry length block, which is movable up and down with the link according to the position and proper movement of the valve through the radius rod and the valve stem. The radius rods attached to the link blocks also the reversing mechanism attached to lifting arms on the reversing shaft, which is connected through the reach rod for the arms of the reverse lever. Lap and lead levers have upper end coupled with the radius rod, but just below the point which are coupled with the valve stem crosshead, to which the attached of the valve stem and the V valve union links connect with the lower end of the lap of the lead lever and the crosshead. Operation. The rotating of the axle imparts the eccentric crank arm of the circular motion that moved the eccentric rod with the valve of the main pin arrived at the bottom of the quarter position with the piston practically with a half stroke with the valve that has moved, and the limit of the travel will have the front port of the open from the emission of the steam and the back port open from the exhaust. For the further movement of the main pin causes the eccentric crank to move with the valve open and with the black steam port with the same with the front port to the exhaust. The action will keep the position with the motion with the driving wheels turning so long as the steam supply was maintained. Any movement of the reverse lever change with the position of the link block with the link and blink block and the link. Care should be taken with obtaining the most economical cutoff required to be handled with the train and with the speed required with any cutoff show if there's less than 25% more steam distribution results. When drifting, starting with the moving slowly at speed, the valve gear should be in full travel. This will ensure proper lubrication, uniform wear of the valve and bushings. Most often, lubricating is equipped with a sniffing valve located on the side of the valve chamber. This valve opens with the engine number, the drifting with the throttle closed that prevents air and hot gases, etc., from being drawn from the smoke box into the cylinders. Every effort should be made to prevent water from getting into the cylinders, as it cannot get out past the valve packing rings and may result in the damage to the locomotive. Leaking piston valve with the cylinder packing ring to retard the operation of the engine can be causing back pressure to the opposite end of the cylinder and destroys lubrication. Breakdowns. A number of the breakdowns require disconnecting the valve gear, and the following gear principles should be observed. Alright, blocking a valve with the cover ports, remove the eccentric rod, disconnect the union link at the front end of the end, secure at the bottom of the lag, and lead lever to the back cylinder for the cock to clear the crosshead. Place the valve to cover the ports and fasten securely main ends of the blocking bolts in the valve stem crossing head guide. Open cylinder cock with the crack throttle. If the steam does not repair to either cylinder cock with the valve is central and its seat, front cylinder head broken and knocked out, or piston broken. Block the valve to cover the ports on the side involved with the proceed on one side. Alright, guide is broken or lost or piston rod bent. Take down the main rod, remove the broken parts, block the crosshead in such a manner as to clear the crank pins and rods. Block the valve to cover the ports on the side involved with the proceeding on one side. Eccentric crank arm broken. Remove the broken or damaged parts. Block the valve to cover the ports on the side involved with the proceeding on one side. Main rod is broken. Remove the broken parts. Block the crosshead in the forward position on the guide. Broke valve to cover the ports on the inside involved with the proceeding on one side. Failure to breakage with the power of reverse gear reach rod lift shaft of arms. Remove or secure broken parts. Block link in desired position is proceed. Valve stem broken outside in the cylinder. Place the valve into the cover ports, loosen the valve stem gland, secure in a cock position on the valve stem to hold the valve and proceed. Valve broken inside the cylinder, engine will be disabled, assistance shall be requested. Failure other than valve gear parts, remove the secure broken parts, disconnect any of the parts that will impart any of the motion of the valve on the side of the involved, and remove secure them in the safe position. Block valve to cover the ports and so on the side involved with the proceed on one side. Breakdown not due to the defective valve with the gear parts, but thus totally destroys the movement of the valve. Remove the secure broken parts of the block valve with the cover parts on the one side involved. Engine running on one side, stop at the dead center on the side not disconnected. 1. If the main rod is not disconnected, unclap the valve on the disabled side and move it out to the off center. Give the engine enough steam to move good in its side off center. Reblock the valve to cover the ports on the disabled side. A light train may be handled by the engine with a broken eccentric crank arm or eccentric rod with it blocking the valve on the disabled side in the following manner. To start the engine, it will be necessary to place the reverse lever in about 25% cut off after the marking of the parts of the revolution. The reverse lever must be placed in the position so that the link block will be at the center of the link, and the position of the back end of the radius rod will be held firmly, and the valve will receive this movement from the crosshead, which is sufficient to admit the steam to the cylinder. Starting the assistance may be necessary after the engine is motion, but the reverse lever must be moved off the center to the steam will be trapped in the cylinders and considerable damage may result. When necessary to run on one side of both remains of rods up, that cylinder may be lubricated by the removing of the HESA indicator plugs on the side of the cylinder, pouring oil through the holes to the preventing churning of the air for the heating of the cylinder. Leave these plugs out and remove the cylinder cocks. Alright, figure 54 section throws the section through the Baker valve gear inside a mission. Reach rod, verse yoke, bell crank, gear frame, gear connection rod, eccentric rod, radius bar, valve rod, valve stem crosshead, union link, combination lever, section at the bell crank, and section at the reverse yoke. Your brake valve gear. This is an outside gear taken in the motion with the eccentric crank attached to the main crank pin from the main crosshead. But the valve gear, figure 54, page 123, consists of the following parts. 1. An eccentric crank rod. 2. The eccentric rod. 3. The gear connection rod. 4. The gear frame. 5. The reverse yoke. 6. The radius bar. 7. The bell crank. 8. The valve rod. 9. The valve stem crosshead. And 10. Combination lever. 11. Union rod. The reverse yoke is pivoted to the gear frame with having the upper end attached with the gear race rod, and the reverse yoke are pivoted on the radius bars to the lower end with which the gear connection rod is attached. The gears connecting the rod extend the downward, connecting with the eccentric rod upward, and connecting with the bell crank, which is pivoted in the gear frame with the motion derived from the eccentric crank to carry through the valve gear to the valve rod, is here combined with the motion of the combination lever to transmit it to the valve by means of the valve stem. The breakdowns. The handle of the Baker valve of the gear in case of the accident may be divided into the following 3 general classes. Alright, the main rod up, valve not blocked. Broken eccentric crank arm, eccentric rod, connection rod, radius bar, horizontal arm of the bell crank of the reverse yoke below reach rod. Remove the eccentric rod, block bell crank the valve with the disabled side with receive the motion from the combination lever that for the enough that seems to the cylinder to do the certain amount of work. The engine can be reversed. Care must be taken not to come over the stop with a good side on the center, as it would be impossible to start the engine. 2. Broken the valve of the gear, each rod with the reverse, the arm of the reverse yoke of each rod connection. Remove the broken parts, block the disabled side with the desired proportion, proceed. Engine should not be reversed without changing the block on the disabled side. Failure in the main H rod with lifting shaft bearing while lifting shaft arm. Block both reverse yokes at desired cutoff and control speed with the throttle. 2. The main rod down valve blocked. Damaged main rod, main crosshead guides or pistons. Remove the main rod, valve rod, leaving the rest of the gear intact. If the main rod is in the solid rear end of the type, making it necessary to remove the eccentric rod and the crank arm of the valve rod may be left up. Block valve to cover the ports and clamp up the block main crosshead in such a manner that it is clear to the crank pins of the rod, and the reverse lever that is free with the other side of the engine can be run on the one cylinder by the working engine at long cutoffs. Broken crosshead pin with a union link pin is coupled to. Proceed the same as damaged main rod, main crosshead, etc., except the remove the union link of the wire bottom at the end of the combination lever to some convenient place to keep it from swinging. 3. The main rod up in the valve blocked. Broken vertical arm of the bell crank or cylinder head broken or blown out, remove the valve rod. Broken union link, crosshead arm, and combination lever, remove the valve rod and such broken parts as would interfere with the running of the engine. When drifting down long grades with the reverse lever, this should never be dropped below 40% with the cutoff. The lever to the lower further than this will cause excessive stress to be set up in the valve gear parts. While traveling at high speed on locomotives not equipped with the drifting valve, the main throttle should be left open slightly to emit the little steam so that the valve lubrication will not be destroyed. Every effort should be made to prevent water from getting into the cylinders, as it cannot get by the valve backing rings and may result in the serious damage to the valve gear, of the crosshead of the pistons. Alright, your Franklin system of steam distribution type A, class T1 locomotive. The system of the steam distribution involved the use of the poppet type of the valve for controlling the emission with exhaust steam of the locomotive cylinders, and consisting of the following principal parts. Drive, plate 1 and 2, rear of the book. Cylinders associated parts plates 1, 2, and 4 of the rear of the book. Cam, boxes, gearboxes, power, reverse gear. 1. The driver. The plates 1 and 2 of the rear of the book. The actuating motion of the equipment is taken from the 2 crosshead pins of each of the unit by the unit either the front of the back engine. The unit rod is mounted at the end of each of the cross pin of the connection with the crosshead driving arm. Crosshead driving arm is fitted to the intermediate drive shaft of the short arm, with which connects the drive rod. The other end of the drive rod is attached to the gearbox drive arm, and is managed to take into the fact that one main driver follows the other 90 degrees to cover the device to function without eccentric cranks. The remainder of the outside drive cat consists of the connection rod joining with the gearbox to take off the arms with the camshaft arms. 2. The cylinders and associated parts, plates 1, 2, and 4, rear of the book. Steam chest, 1 of each of the end of the cylinder contained with the poppet valve, the end are cast integral with the cylinder barrel, and the saddle with the frame mounting with their similar and conventional types. However, the steam exhaust patches are arranged differently to suit the requirements for the poppet valve. For each of the 2 steam shafts, there is a separate steam pipe flange. There is these being connected over the top of the cam box by the branch pipe joined to the steam of the pipe from the header. The intake of the valve to open into the steam chamber to admit the steam into the cylinder port. The exhaust valve open in the cylinder port. and release the steam of the exhaust passage for each of the exhaust valve at each end of the cylinder, for there is being separate exhaust passage for all of these passages being brought together below the exhaust and seat. Poppet valves are horizontal double-seated type for each for the end of the cylinder. That there are two intake, two exhaust valves. The exhaust valves being located close to the cylinder barrel and below the intake valves. Alright, 3. The cam boxes. Plate 1, 2, and 4 of the rear of the book on one each of the cylinder mounted one cam box with the space between the two steam chests. Each box contains the two camshafts lower of the exhaust of the upper of the intake of the cams or the camshaft should receive the isolation motion for the gearbox through the rear gearbox, taking off the arms and connecting rods. As cams oscillate with the Kinetech rollers carried for the intermediate lever of the fulcrum at the upper end of the lower end of the intermediate levers are hardened buttons bearing the egg end tappets which pass through the wall of the cam box with contact with the valve stem to push the valves open and spring are provided with the closed valves. Maximum opening of the exhaust valves is attained within all but the shortest cutoff of the opening of the intake valve. The decrease of the shorter cutoff valve, the air and similar on top of each of the camshaft throughout the system are spline shaft with the levers hold on and the intake valves open when the air is submitted to it while drifting. For the graph gearbox, plate 1, 2, and 3, 1 and 2, rear of the box. One gearbox is located slightly ahead of above the front cylinder. The other is located vertically behind the front rear cylinders. The gearbox contains the valve motions of the reverse mechanism on each side of the gearbox. There is one connection with the engine mechanism. This connection is made from the crosshead by the drive rods, the crosshead drive arm shaft, and which transmit the crosshead movements to the gearboxes. The mechanism in the gearbox consists of the forward independent valve motions, the one intake, one exhaust valve motion for each side of the engine. The principle of the valve motion is similar to that of the Walser shaft gear, with the exemption that the links are not driven from the eccentric crank, but from the crosshead of the opposite side. The driver shaft with the right-hand side of the engine is connected to the yoke, which drives the link saddle of the left-hand side of the engine crew, the yoke connecting rod, link drive rocker, and link connection rod. The link saddle on the right-hand side of the engine is driven by the drive shaft on the left-hand side of the engine through the yoke of the yoke connecting rod, linking drive rocker, and linking connection rod. An intake and exhaust link of each side of the are mounted in the same link saddle to receive in the same movement. 5. Power reverse gear. Plate 14, page 130. A small power reversal gear controls the system of the steam distribution. The power reverse gear, located entirely with the cab, is connected with the gear with the box. The rotating shaft equipped with the universal joint spring joints allow the shaft to adjust themselves to expansion with the contraction of the boiler. The power reverses the gear and actuated with a small air motor controlled with the control valve by a hand and lever. There's two mid-gear positions, mid-gear forward, mid-gear backward. Between these two positions, the neutral position called the drifting position, into which the reverse gear should be moved during long drifting periods. At such time, the three-way cock should also be opened to admit the air into the drafting cylinder from the cam box. The desired cutoff is obtained with the positioning of the reverse lever, which is held in place with the latchet engaging the notched quadrant. The cutoff that are indicated by the pointer attached by the handle lever traveling over the calibrated cutoff indicating plate on the quadrant. Change from full gear to forward to full gear backward. Pull the handle back. Change from full gear backward to full gear forward, and push the handle ahead. In case of the air failure, the gear can be worked by the hand. Remove the cap of the rear of the gear. A wrench can then be used to expose on the hex end of the operating screw. This hand lever must be unlatched while doing this. Structure for operation. There is a little difference in the handling of the locomotive equipped with the Franklin system of the steam distribution are compared with the conventional piston valve locomotive. The system allows the use of a very short cutoff of approximately 10%. For most economical operations, the throttle should be kept wide open. The locomotive should be operated with a short cutoff as possible. The shortest running of the cutoff is the mid-gear marked on the reverse gear plate with the mid-gear forward and mid-gear backward. Due to short cutoff of the exhaust of the poppet valve, the locomotive is likely to be soft. Therefore, the depth of the fire must be regulated accordingly. Should be as thin as possible. When starting the train, it is necessary to have the reverse gear in the maximum cutoff position. Full gear. As soon as the train is underway, the cutoff should be shortened gradually. Upon shutting off the throttle, moving the handle with the three-way, drifting the control of the cock and the drifting position. During the long drifting period, move the reverse gear into the position indicated on the reverse gear of the dial by drifting. While running on one direction, never to pass the drifting position located essentially between the mid-gear forward and mid-gear backward on reverse gear of the indicator toward the other direction. When the engine is left on by the crew in the reverse gear, the drifting control valve should be placed in the drifting position. Before the dispatching of the locomotive is made, normally the gearbox can box the mechanical lubricator contains sufficient quantity of the oil and that the mechanical lubricator is working properly. Alright, this is your reverse gear, air motor, control valve, hand lever, indicator pitcher, quadrant, screw shafts, indicator plate, reverse screw nut, reverse screw, floating lever for bevel gear, screw shaft for bevel gear, air motor, poppet valve, end cover, control valve, connection rod, control lever. Operating with one unit in the case of the damage in either unit of the unit can be cut out with the engine moved by the operator of the unit with the receipt of the valves. Remove the crosshead drive arm of the unit rods on both sides of the damaged unit. This allows all the intake valves to remain closed and held by the spring and the steam pressure. Block outside exhaust valve open when this is done by the loosening of the exhaust valve chamber. The head covers the relevant spring pressure and introducing 1-inch blocks of wood in between the exhaust valve stems and tap is replace the cover plates. In the case of the distance to travel to be is not too great, this is a permissible block. Open the cylinder cocks and sever the exhaust valve. Proceed with a good unit. Never under any circumstances attempt to move the engine with one side of the valve motion disconnected. Very serious damage to the gearbox is likely to result. Lubrication of the valve stems are lubricated with the valve oil with the mechanical lubricant of the various pins of the bearings of the driving arm, lubricated through the regular almalite fittings bearings. In the back of the cam boxes are oil from the inside of the cab box for the independent force of the feed connections. Parts inside of the gearboxes are splashed and lubricated with the medium gas engine oil SAE 30. Cam boxes are flooded with the valve oil pumped through the distribution pipe with the cover plate with the pump is located at the bottom of the camshaft. Cam box is driven by an arm link connected with the outer face of the exhaust camshaft and necessary for the pipe that can be cranked by the hand. Oil level indicator is provided with the outside of the face for the cam box. The reverse gear mechanism in the cab has only one point with the almighty 3-point lubricate with the motor for oil. The air motor is oiled through the drop feed with the oil cup and set with the air supply line using the motor and air or compressor air oil. Alright, compression. What is the purpose of the valve gear? Describe the piston valve. What is the valve chamber? Define the valve term. Port, full gear, cutoff, steam lap, lead, emission, expansion, exhaust, and compression. What is meant by the valve opening square? What is the effect of the valve out of square? How can you determine the valves are out of square? What are the principal parts of the Walchester valve gear? Briefly describe the operation of Walchester gear. What are the cutoff? Should the engine be worked into the order to obtain the most economical results? Of what cutoff should be the valve be placed in with the drifting starting with the moving at slow speed with the Walchester valve gear? What is the sniffing valve and what is the purpose? What the damage may result with water and getting into the cylinders? What effect is the leaking piston valve of the cylinder packing rings have on the operating of the engine? How do you block the piston valve to cover the ports? On examining Walchester valve gear engine should be done if the front cylinder head is broken and knocked out of the piston broke, guide is broken and lost spare piston rod bent, eccentric crank arm broken, main rod is broken, failure of the breakage power reverser gear, reach rod, lifting shaft or arms, valve stem broken outside the cylinder, valve broken inside the cylinder, valve or other valve gear parts broken down not due to defective valve gear parts that totally destroy the movements of the valve. 507, engine running on one side of the stop, the dead center on the side not disconnected. 508, how can your light train be handled by using both sides of the Westchester valve gear, eccentric crank arm and eccentric rod is broken? Where the eccentric rod disconnected using the both side of the should reverse lever be placed in the other center position? Why? One running with one side with both remaining rods or main rods are up. How many dead cylinder levers may be located? Where does the Baker valve grater then receive the motion of the movement of the valve? Name the parts of the Baker valve gear. Describe the operation of the Baker valve gear. Baker valve gear engine with the main rod down with the valve not blocked. What should be done? Eccentric crank and arm, eccentric rod, connection rod, radius broke bar, horizontal arm of the bell crank, reverse yoke bellow reach rod of the broken is in steam admitted with the both cylinders. Can the engine be reversed? What precautions should be taken when coming to a stop? Valve gear, reach rod, reverse arms, reverser yoke. Each of the rod connection is broken. With how can the engine be reversed? Main reach rod, lifting shaft bearing of the lifting shaft arm is broken. Main rod, main crosshead guides and piston is damaged. Broken crosshead pin with the union links coupled to it on a Baker valve gear engine with the main rod up to the valve blocked. With the shutter to be done if in the valve vertical arm of the valve crank is broken, the cylinder head is broken and blown out. Union line crosshead arm combination lever is broken. What if the cutoff should the Baker valve gear and engine be placed with the drifting down with long grades and why? How should the throttle be used in drifting in the water with the Baker valve gear engine not equipped with the drifting valves? Why? What damage may result from the water getting into the cylinder of the Baker valve gear engine? Name the principal parts of the Franklin system with the steam distribution center. From what part of the locomotive is the actuating motion taken from the equipment? How many intake the exhaust valves and are each of the cylinder? What is their location? How many of the cam boxes are on each cylinder and which are they located to? What are their gearboxes located with the actual power of the reverse gear? When in the case of the air failure to the power of reverser, what should be done? How is the locomotive equipped with the poppet valves operated? How is the most economical operation at speed obtained? What is necessary in starting the train with the poppet valve locomotive? What should be done with the shutting off of the throttle? What should be done during the long drifting periods? What should be done with the position of the reverse gear on the drifting control valve when the engine is left by crew? In the case of the damage of either unit, how can that unit be cut out and damaged and moved with the operating unit? Is it permissible under any circumstances to operate a unit with one side of the valve motion disconnected? What is likely to result? Alright, Chapter 22, Pounds, Blows, and the Cylinders and Valves. Pounds. The principal causes of pounds are loose wedges, driven box and shells worn loose pedestal caps, broken frame, loose worn side of the main rod brasses, worn guides on the crosshead piston rod, loose in the crosshead piston, striking front and back cylinder head of the piston head loose on the rod. 10 cylinder looses on the frame cross fan, loose flat spots on tires, loose crank pin, water in cylinders. Pounds may be located with placing a main pin on the top of the quarter on the side of the examined to give the cylinder a little steam while the moving of the reverse lever back and forth, observing the different parts of the engine to develop the cylinder pound when the drifting is indicated to loose the piston head or the piston of the striking the cylinder head due to the main rod being too long or too short. The throttle should be kept slightly open to form the cushion in the cylinders. When the running of the reverse levers in the full gear and the reverse gear valve gear knocks rattles ceases when the reverse levers move to notch or two is indicated that the link block is striking at the end of the link. This is generally caused by a reaching rod being too long or too short. If the repairs cannot be made to stop the pounds, a proper report should be made to given to the location of the pounds. Alright, blows and cylinders and valve. The cylinder packing of the rings located with the groove in the piston head of the piston valve packing rings that should always be in good condition. Leaking cylinder packing or valve rings cause steam to blow by them and it is wasted. This causes loss of power and destroys lubrication. Broken valve main piston cylinder packing will cause the engine to blow so badly that it will disable. The broken valve will not permit the engine to proceed on one side. However, if the trouble is in the cylinder, the engine may be prepared for operating on one side. The following tests may be made for locating a blow in the valve chamber of the ore cylinder. Place the main pin on the top quarter on the side of the test. Apply the independent brake and open the cylinder. Valve test. Place the reverse lever in the center so that the valve covers the port. Open the throttle and no steam appear if either cylinder cock of the valve is tight. Cylinder packing test. Let the engine stand in the same position when the testing of the valve. Move the reverse lever to the full forward and backward position. Open the throttle, and if the steam does not appear at the both cylinder cocks at the same time, the packaging is tight. The above procedure should be duplicated to the test of the opposite side. Question in chapter: what are the principal causes of the pounds? How can pounds be located? What may be the cause of if the engine develops the cylinder pound with the drifting? What should be done? What may be the cause of the knocks and rattles in the valve gear with the reverse lever is in full forward gear, but see if the engine is hooked up in a notch or so? What should be done when the pounds develop? When storage the cylinder's piston packing rings in good condition, what may cause the engine blow so badly it will be disabled? The valve damage can be proceeded on one side. If the piston is damaged, can you proceed on one side? How do you test the piston valve for blow? How do you test the cylinder for the defective cylinder packing rings? Alright, Chapter 23, Locomotive Booster. The purpose of the booster is to give an additional traction motor for the starting of the train whenever the locomotive is about to install. It consists of a two-cylinder steam engine mounted with the train truck on a trailer truck frame. With taking charge of the booster equipped with the locomotive, the following instructions should be observed. Idle booster to ensure that it is readiness for the operation and free from the condensation. After idle booster, allow the booster engine to come to stop before the raising of the booster latch to prevent the clashing of the gears. 3. Boosters must not be cut in the speeds above must not be cut in speeds above 15 miles per hour, and must not be operated at speeds above 30 miles per hour. The boosters are designed for forward operation only. The booster gears should be disengaged before coming to stop to prevent damage. If the train stalled with the booster, engaged with the following procedure should be followed to disengage the booster. Close the locomotive throttle, disengage the booster latch, attach the booster cylinder cocks open and allow the locomotive to move several feet with the backwards. Move the locomotive ahead with the booster gears with the disengagement. Permissible to slow. Move the locomotive backward with the forward distance with the gears engaged with if it's possible to move the locomotive ahead of the disengage of the gears. Lubrication. All moving parts within the booster engaged with the bed are lubricated with the splash methods of maintenance for the proper supply of the oil in the bed is attended to the engine house forces. The booster cylinders of the valves are lubricated from the locomotive lubricator. If a hydrostatic lubricator is used, they should be used at the rate of 2 drops per minute. Mechanical lubricator adjustments are made with the engine house force. If the ash pan is dumped for any reason, the locomotive should be moved so that the booster will not near the hot ashes. Any improper operation defects in the booster must be reported on Form MP62. Question 23. What is the purpose of the locomotive booster? What does the booster consist of, and where is it located? What should be done when taking charge of the booster equipped locomotive? When maximum speed with the booster may be cut in, and with the maximum speed with the booster may be operated, can the booster be operated with the backward motion, which should be done before coming to stop when the booster engine is in operation? If the train stopped with the booster engagement, the should be done with disengage the booster. However, the moving parts of the booster engine bed lubricated. However, the cylinder valve lubricated. If it is necessary to dump ash from the ash pan, which should be done to protect the booster. What should be done when the booster does not operate with properly defects that are notated. Chapter 24, Slip Control, Q2 locomotives. The slip control on the Q2 locomotives is automatically on operation. Throttle needed not to be closed, but the slipping of curves except when the automatic control is not functioning properly. In this case, the throttle may be closed to prevent the slipping at excessive speed. If the air leaks develop in slipping control piping, closing the shutting off the cock valve and air line above the operating cylinder on the left side of the locomotive. In the case of the slipping control from the particular engine from the air, which the air supply has been shut off and not operating, but the cab light will still indicate that the slip occurs under the condition the slip must be stopped with the locomotive throttle. If the slip control light comes on, stay on continuously when the engine is not slipping in the drive. The cable may be broken. In this case, to turn off the switch on the left side of the relay box and pulling the switch down onto the off position. All slippings must then be controlled by closing the locomotive throttle. If the slip control light comes on with the locomotive brakes are applied, the drives on each one engine are sliding. Question on Chapter 4. Should the throttle be closed when the slipping occurs with the locomotive equipped with the slip control? Under which condition should the throttle be closed? What should be done if the airbags develop a slip control piping? What result would they obtain with the shutoff cock and the airline would close? How could the slip be stopped when the air supply has been shut off with the slip control? What may cause the slip control light to come on and stay on and continuous when the engine is not slipping? What should be done with the slipping control light when it becomes and stays on continuously when the engaged engine is not slipping? How can slipping then be controlled? What is taking place, and if the slipping controlling light comes on when the locomotive brakes are applied? Alright, Chapter 25, Duties of the Engineer at the completion of the trip. The completion of the trip, the engine should be inspected for the hot parts or other defects. The engineer should also know that the fire is in proper condition, that it is not less than the 2 gauge of the water and boiler. There is sufficient water in the tender to handle the engine over the ash pit. The throttle is securely closed. The reverse lever is in center. The cylinder cock is open. The hydrostatic lubricator valves are closed. An imprint brake valve is applied. Necessary action has been taken to prevent the various appliances from freezing in the cold weather. An intelligent report of the condition of the engine must be made with the MP62 form, provided with the form. The special attention should be given to defects that would not otherwise be detected, as the such pounds and blows valve, cylinder packing valves out of the squares defects and feed water pump, low speed and steam leaks. An unusual condition that occurred on the top of the trip should be taken personally with the foreman in the charge. Questions of Chapter 25. What are the duties of the engineer at the completion of the trip? In what condition should the engine be left in the terminal? What attention should be given in the preparation of the MP62 work reports? What should be done to cover an unusual condition that occurred on the trip? Alright, and that completes Pennsylvania Railroad Machinery Examination for Locomotive Fireman, and it was the steam edition, so